Welcome back, my world history people. Happy Monday. This video is for my world history students, obviously. Your first lesson for week 1 is titled The Allies Win. Right? And this is a topic that we fortunately were able to talk about before we couldn't go to school anymore. We finished World War II. So this activity on Play-Doh is going to be, sorry about how long it is. It is 55 slides, but a lot of those slides are not, there's not a lot to do on those slides. And most of it should be review for you because we were able to finish that unit. So this video, I'm going to give you just a quick rundown of key concepts. So please watch this if you have any questions, go through it. I'm not going to go over everything, but I'm going to go over the most important things I believe there are in the lesson. So on slide 7, which is the first real instructional slide, you're going to see a really cool interactive timeline that you can click on various things, and they show you. It tells you dates and it gives you pictures and describes key things that happened in the European theater in World War II. Keep going on. All right, victory in Europe, that was the Allied powers. So remember, that's America, Russia, France, and England, the Allied powers. Victory over basically Germany and Italy in Europe. Remember, Japan was fighting, but that was in the Pacific theater. So it talks about D-Day, right? That's going to be the Canadian, British, and American invasion of the beaches in Normandy, northern France, against Germany, right? That was, we talked about how devastating those battles were for both sides, but it allowed America and the Allies in general, right, England, to get a foothold in the European continent and start to fight back and take land away from Germany, eventually being able to liberate Paris and push Germany back into Germany itself and start bombing and taking out Hitler eventually in Berlin. Goes over the multiple beaches of where they invaded, from Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, those various beaches. Right? It was a multi-tiered attack. There's some really good pictures in this and some really, really good details. For example, on slide 13, it talks about how the United States used faced a huge German resistance, and the United States used 29 tanks to transport troops from the water to land. Only 2 of those even reached the beach. So 27 tanks were shot down, killed in the water. That led to 2,500 United States casualties just on Utah Beach. All right. So we're going to move on to the liberation of Western Europe. So as the Allies moved into France, slide 15 talks about how they started taking back French cities such as Toulon, Marseille, and Dijon. All right, those are just a couple of the ones listed, and they eventually made it all the way to France. I actually had a college friend from Toulon. He's still from Toulon, but fun fact. So basically, we're able to scale back that German resistance, as I referred to earlier. Next, after liberating France, we went into Belgium in the Netherlands. This is where we were caught in the Ardennes Forest, and the Battle of the Bulge happened in the winter. Very, very devastating battle for both sides. Tough conditions, frostbite. It was in the midst of a northern European winter, super, super cold, much colder and worse winters than we get in Ohio because it's very close to the Arctic Circle. We were bombing German cities relentlessly at this time, Dresden, Berlin, really trying to take a total war approach. All right, so that's the Western Front, right? The Allies against Germany. So basically England, Canada, and France and America against Germany. On the other side was the Eastern Front. This is the Soviet Union coming in and attacking Germany from the other side, the eastern side. The Soviets, as we talked about, lost tons of men, tons and tons and tons of men, but that's the cost that they were willing to incur in fighting Germany, and that's what they had. They had to sacrifice those people to take out the Germans. So we talked about the Holocaust. I'm not going to go into that, but the Germans finally surrendered by April 30th. Berlin was under attack by Allied forces, United States, England, and the Soviets. Remember, Hitler killed himself in his bunker, or he killed himself. We don't know if he was able to escape. They believe he was killed, though, or he killed himself. So now on slide 22, you're going to jump to, so now that the Nazis are done in Europe, we're going to jump to the battle in the Pacific. The Pacific theater ended after the European theater. If you remember, the Allies are now fighting Japan, who was an Axis power in the Pacific. The Pacific battles on slide 23 give you a really good visual breakdown of the island hopping campaign General Douglas MacArthur utilized. We talked about and looked at the island hopping campaign in class, and how the goals of that and the ultimate effects and the casualties and all of those details. The goal was to leapfrog across the Pacific all the way to the island of Japan. So moving on along, like I said, I'm skipping to the most important parts. So victory over Japan. On July 26th, Harry Truman, Winston Churchill, Soviet Union's Joseph Stalin gathered at Potsdam, Germany, to discuss Japan, what they were going to do, basically. All right. The declaration stated that military forces would be disarmed. It also stated that the Allies would occupy Japan until conditions of the declaration were met. So Japan had to basically surrender, because remember, at the end of the war, we didn't want to invade Japan because we'd lose millions of people, our military believed. So Harry Truman decided to drop the atomic bombs, which were very controversial, and they haven't been used since then because of the devastating effects. On slide 30, you're going to see the atomic age. We didn't get to the atomic age. That was our next unit. But Einstein, which you'll see back here, Einstein was basically the chief architect of creating the atomic bombs that were used. By the time they were used, he was against them. He was very conflicted on the use of them. He didn't think it was moral because of how devastating they were. But regardless of what he thought, the United States used them, and it created the atomic age, where from that point, the Cold War started, and countries, the United States, Soviet Union, competed who could make the best and the most atomic weapons. Right? You're going to see standoffs between JFK and Nikita Khrushchev. You're going to see standoffs between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. You're going to see all of that in the communism unit. All right, so in this atomic age, this Cold War is growing. Our job wasn't done overseas. Right? We had to oversee the rebuilding of Europe and Japan. Right? America played that role. We took that role on our shoulders and ran with it. And in a lot of ways, helping out Europe and Japan boosted the American economy. So it was good for everybody. He has, once again, some great pictures of the aftermath. It was unfortunate, but there's some really good primary source pictures. So after World War II, the world was in crisis, humanitarian crisis. Millions of people were struggling, millions of deaths. It was a terrible time in many parts of the world other than really America. Many civilians were drastically hurt. All right, so slide 38 talks about the Allied occupation of Europe. It was agreed upon that Germany, the country of Germany, would be broken into 4 parts. The United States would have a part. The French would have a part. United Kingdom or England would have a part. And USSR or the Soviet Union or Russia would have another part. This is really where the Cold War started, because The United States wanted to do something, and the Soviet Union wanted to do something else. So they started to butt heads. So not only was the country divided into 4 parts, the capital city of Germany, Berlin, was also broken into 4 parts, also held by England, France, United States, and the Russians. It was a mess. So you're going to see the Berlin airlift, where we had to send in goods because the Soviets had blocked off the Allied parts of the city. All right, and that in the next unit on communism, you're going to see evolve. We also had to occupy Japan. We only occupied Japan until 1950, and Douglas MacArthur, who was the chief general, United States general in charge of the Pacific, oversaw that process. So basically, he made policies that removed weapons from the country, shut down Japan's military, and stopped military officers from gaining political power. He had a lot of reforms that tried to correct issues that caused World War II, within Japan at least. So after World War II is the first time on a global scale we tried to seek justice for victims. So between 1945 and 1949, the US, British, French, and Soviet military conducted trials of Nazi Germans who were accused of committing war crimes and the genocide against the Jews during the Holocaust. This is on slide 42. Out of all of that, only 12 defendants or people tried in court were put to death. The rest were given prison sentences. 24 defendants were tried, so 12 got death sentences, 12 got prison sentences. 24 people, that is not a lot for the grand scale of what the Germans did, the Nazis did during World War II. Many people were not happy with the punishments of these war trials. Many people thought that the Allies did not do enough to punish Germany for World War II. But as we learned from World War I, punishing Germany was not a good idea, because that's what started World War II, one of the reasons. There were also war trials in Tokyo. All right? Douglas MacArthur, as I mentioned earlier, he presided over these trials. These trials oversaw cases spanning the period from the invasion of Manchuria in 1931 all the way to the end of World War II in 1945. This is on slide 43. 9 Japanese political leaders and 18 military officers were tried. 6 defendants received death sentences, including former Prime Minister Tojo Hideki, which we had in that one activity where we made the cutouts of the various dictators. So between the Nuremberg trials in Germany and the trials in Japan, we tried to, on a not national, but global level, we sought justice for the victims of World War II. Whether we got that completely is still debated heavily within circles of academics. All right, so after World War II, or after World War I, if you remember, the League of Nations was created. The League of Nations had no teeth. Remember, they had no military. They had really no power. They were slow to act. They basically were just an organization. They had no power. They had no teeth. So therefore, after World War II, the world power sought to create an actual organization that could keep the peace and would have power. They created the United Nations. The United Nations is a building and complex in New York City. You can go see that today. President basically speaks there. The United States president speaks there yearly. It was created in 1945 at the end of the war. On slide 48, you will see a picture of the United Nations building in New York City. All right. And then the rest of the slides go through the different details of and roles of the United Nations. But basically, there are troops that the United Nations has, peacekeeping troops that they send to countries that need help keeping the peace. Recently, in parts of Africa, Rwanda, South Africa peacekeeping troops have been sent out. All right, so there is a summary video at the end that I encourage you to watch. It'll help if you have any questions throughout the entire video, and it'll help if you didn't get your questions answered from my video here today. I hope that this video cleared some things up. I know it's kind of long, but it was a long lesson, and I wanted to walk you through some of the key concepts. Once again, this is a lesson that all of you have had before. We were lucky to finish this before the corona outbreak stopped schooling for us. All right, so once again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at my email. I hope you received my email last night that I sent, Sunday night. I hope you obviously are watching my YouTube videos or on my school website. Stay safe. Wash those hands. El Prez, signing out.